We're talking 49ers drafts on today's Locked On 49ers, a potential conundrum at pick 31, best player available versus need, in an NFL draft Q&A live episode, Locked On 49ers, coming at you right now.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at Peacock at Crocky209. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We love all the everydayers out there, and we love it when you are subscribed. Hit the like, hit the thumbs up, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live, and you can get in on some of these chats with us as we're talking NFL draft on today's episode. And, of course, you can find us everywhere you find your audio podcasts as well. Croc, doing a podcast earlier this week, and by the way, you guys should subscribe to my new channel. I'll actually drop it here in the chat as well, the link to it. Talking with Brad Graham and John Chapman, and we were breaking down offensive linemen, had a nice long chat, and it's definitely a conversation you should check out. And it kind of dawned on me some ideas about the draft and how things might go. And as we talked through all of these offensive linemen, we all kind of liked a similar group of guys, but felt the same way about them. And we each liked a different player, and we each had a different favorite player that maybe the Niners could get if they get lucky and someone falls, or if the 49ers trade up for a certain offensive lineman. If, who we believe is going to be there at 31. We had three different guys there that we liked that were fits for the San Francisco 49ers. And then we thought, okay, well, what if you move back? You would kind of like these guys a little bit more. And then we started thinking, well, wait a second. If it's not an ideal pick at 31 on the offensive line, you don't want to force need. You want to go BPA. So what if best player available is a defensive lineman or a wide receiver or any other position in the draft, a defensive back? Do you go there and do you bypass best player available? What if you really, really want to get a tackle and you don't think you can get a tackle on day two? Do you force it at pick 31 instead of drafting maybe the best player who actually maybe is a guard, but it doesn't have the positional value of the offensive tackle? You don't think you can get a starting tackle potentially after round one. So those are the ideas that have been rattling around in my head, and I want to start there, Croc, with sort of the strategy at pick 31 for the 49ers as we sit here and look at who could potentially be there for the 49ers. And if you're looking at it through the lens of, okay, 49ers did a lot of work in free agency on defense, they're really focusing in on the offense. And do you just say, okay, Graham Barton, he's the best player, but he's a center. He's not going to play tackle, and we might not get a tackle in this draft. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with going, well, maybe they're in the same group. Let's get this other guy who we prefer to take in the second round. We don't have any trade offers. Do you just take the tackle knowing that it's higher positional value and you can't potentially get one later? How do you balance those two ideas of best player available versus need?
I think we've had this conversation and brought this up earlier. I think a lot of people, even when you and I, we did a mock draft, and it's like 100% it has to be tackle at that first spot. And they want tackle without having to trade Brandon Aiyuk away and getting a higher pick so you can get a more valued tackle in this class. In my opinion, you take the highest player on your board, regardless of position. I feel like the 49ers have put them in that type of situation, that type of position to where they can take best player available. You want them to, address the offensive line. Of course, we would love to see them improve on it. I think the 49ers would love to say, you know what, if we draft this guy right here, he's going to come in day one and start over McKivitz, or he's going to start over Feliciano. But the odds of that happening at pick 31, it's a little slimmer, even in a deep tackle draft. So in the event of that, I think you take a player at 31 that potentially can come in right away and play, whether it's a tackle, which you would love to do, or if it's a cornerback, or if it's a tight end too, that would be on the field a lot more as opposed to a red shirt type of offensive lineman, because you drafted this guy's not really ready to play over certain guys that you have. And I saw this situation you guys got into on overtime with BP, where if you bypass tackle at 31 because it's just not the highest player on your board, and you go with the highest player, and then you go to the second round, the end of the second round, there may not be that offensive lineman that you like there. And then before you know it, it looks like you've neglected the offensive line when really it's just the way that the board falls. And I think we see that a lot. And when you force a player, real quick, you end up, I was listening to a podcast and Mayock was on, right? Former Raiders GM, right? Mayock?
Yeah,
Mayock was on talking about that 4th overall pick in the Bosa draft. And he tried to trade up with the 49ers to get Nick Bosa. They tried to move back. Nobody wanted to trade back with them. So it's like, oh, we have to get an edge. We're going to go Clelin Ferrell at pick 4th overall. And what happened? It wasn't the right pick. They did not want him right there. They didn't value him at that spot. But because of how the board fell, which it felt like they thought it would, they had no choice but to kind of go with a player where it's like, oh, we're going to force this position. And that's what happened, as opposed to you kind of let things happen a little bit organically later in that draft. Who did they take in the 4th round? None other than Max Crosby. But he was an organic pick, and then it developed into an awesome defensive end. You don't force players just because it's a need. You get the right player that's going to fit no matter what position that is.
How much stock do you put into positional value? Like, how much more valuable is a tackle than a center, say? Or how much more valuable is a defensive lineman than a linebacker? And we have this conversation all the time. The ultimate one is running back, right? And I'm like, yeah, just don't take a running back in the first round. Don't do it. If you take a guy, even if you take a running back on day 2, he better be dynamic. He better impact the passing game, and just know that you probably shouldn't pay him after 4 years either in a lot of cases. And there's outliers and there's players that are worth paying and having on your football team. And we've hashed out the Christian McCaffrey trade, which turned out really good for the San Francisco 49ers, but he's a special player. So if you think there's a guy who's special, it kind of doesn't matter what position, right, Croc? If he's special. But if the place where you get tackles is the first round and you don't get one, where do you get one, Croc? And the Niners didn't have a first-round pick for 3 years. And their roster is starting to show it. Like, that's the place where you get. So we're looking at the needs. Okay, well, man, they might need a tackle as a good defensive or a good pass rushing tackle. They need a defensive end, starting caliber defensive end of the future. They need a starting caliber offensive lineman, but especially tackle. Those are first-round types of needs. Cornerback, hard to find. Easier maybe than some other positions, but sometimes hard to find a cornerback in the first round. So that's where I struggle with this, because it's like, man, where else are you going to get an offensive tackle unless you're going to go pay a guy Mike McGlinchey money on the open market and maybe not get a guy that's really worth the money you're paying there either in free agency, whether it's trying to find a guy now. And the 49ers obviously didn't go spend money on tackle, and they're okay with going into the season with Colton McKivitz, it looks like, or somebody competing with him. But that's what I struggle with, is the value or the positional value. And is it worth it to have a player that's one tier below at a position that's so hard to find versus another position that is not? And I love the Clelin Ferrell example, because that's clearly an example of you want a defensive end, fine, but you can't draft a guy that's not a difference-making player, especially when you're drafting number 4 overall, right? And so you're muted there, Croc. But
my bad. Don't draft the wrong guy. Like, you could have drafted Brian Burns and you decided to go with Clelin Ferrell. So, like, that's also a mistake by them not being able to identify that, which, in my opinion, this is not in hindsight. Like, Brian Burns was just the better pass rusher. I thought he was like a special pass rusher. I thought he was even more freakish as a pure pass rusher than Nick Bosa. I just thought Nick Bosa was an all-around better end. So, whiffing on that becomes an issue as well. But to answer your question about the positional value, in my opinion, it starts to kind of go out the window once you pass like pick 15. After that, and again, you are less likely to see guards go in the first round. But if there is a guard that I really like and I feel like he can step in day 1 and start, then you draft that guard, even though it's pick 31 in the first round. You know, if you're talking about even top 10, I don't necessarily care to take a receiver in the top 10, because I think you can have very productive receivers outside that, and it's harder to get the big-time tackles, the big-time edge rushers, guys that play kind of those premium quarterbacks that play those premium positions. So if I'm in the top 10, kind of give me one of those 3. But once you pass top 10, especially top 15, you can start going with best player available. I don't think it's impossible for the 49ers to find a starting tackle at the tail end of the first round. I do feel like they potentially might have to trade up for the guy that they want. You can get a guy pick 20, 22, 23, 24. Cowboys got Tyler Smith out of Tulsa. They played him at guard, moved him to tackle. He's done well. Coming out, he was a little bit more raw and more of a project type player, but he's developed nicely, even though he started at guard, then transitioned to tackle and got Tyron Smith out of there. So there are guys that you can get later at tackle, but there's a chance you may have to trade up for the guy that you really want.
Yeah, that's where the maneuverability is key. And if I got a draft strategy for you, it's early. We're a couple weeks out here, Croc. I'm getting pretty locked into what I think my draft strategy is for the San Francisco 49ers at pick 31, which sets up the rest of the draft and how maneuvering the board might work best, knowing this draft class a lot better than I did, say, a month ago after we've done some deep dives on a lot more prospects here, as we are going to continue to do, getting you ready for draft day on Locked On 49ers. I want to see your draft-related questions as well in the chat, and Croc and I will hit those next. This episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home that W. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Here's my draft strategy, Croc. Tell me what you think about this. Stay put at 31. I think there's going to be some talent there at 31. You go best player available. We've talked a lot about some of these prospects. Darius Robinson might be there for the 49ers. Chop Robinson might be there for the 49ers. Maybe it's a Marius Mims. I'm not trading up for Mims, but Mims is, I think, too talented. And we disagreed on this. John Chapman's like, yeah, I can't do it, man. I can't.
Third round grade.
Yeah. And it's like, I get where he's coming from, but it's hard to find. And we talked about it. It's hard to find that much talent. Chris Furster, go coach him up, right, at 31. And probably not moving up for someone like that, though. Kool-Aid McKinstry, whoever it is, there's going to be someone there for the 49ers, I think, at 31. And I look at the 49ers draft in those 3 4th-round picks, Croc. And this is my draft strategy. Whether it's pick 31, pick 63, pick 94, Niners got to go up. And, like, you can go down. If you're at 31 and you're like, whatever, we got 10 guys with very similar grades that we like a lot. Someone wants to come up to the end of round 1. Sure, drop down. But it's really not that valuable to go down a few picks. If you go down 5 picks and you get a 4th, 5th round pick, I'd rather just have the 5th-year option on the guy I'm going to take anyway at 31. So I don't even know if that's super valuable unless you're dropping down quite a bit out of round 1. So I still like staying at pick 31 and picking a guy there. Those 3 4th-round picks, Croc, are what I'm looking at. Whatever the 49ers can do with one of those 4th-round picks, and you look at the chart, and it's not big in the first round, you might be able to get up a couple spots, though. Let's say the last 2 players you really want at 31 if you're the 49ers and you're John Lynch, the first one goes off the board at 27. You're on the horn with the Buffalo Bills. Like, dude, 4th-round pick. Let's get up and get our guy, right? Go up a little bit. That's fine. I'm not going up to pick 17. From pick 31 and spending what that would cost in draft capital to go get a guy. I'm sitting at 31. Hopefully one of those players that you like is able to fall to you there and you get best player available. Then that sets you on your path for round 2, round 3. And I think that's where the 49ers can get mobile, Croc, is going up in round 2. Let's say it's Kool-Aid McKinstry. The 49ers draft Kool-Aid McKinstry at pick 31. He falls to them there. And they say, okay, we got him. But there's this group of 5 offensive linemen still on the board that we like a lot. Now let's get on the horn and go up. And let's offer with this 4th-round pick, see if we can get up from pick 63 and get up to pick 55 and get that last one that's still there for us there. And then you get your offensive lineman. Then you get your best player available at 31, and you make the draft board work for you, and then you see what happens in round 3 and 4 from there. Or maybe the guy, maybe it's round 3 that you want to move up, and you can go even further because your 4th-round pick is worth even more versus that 3rd-round pick from 93. Or 94, where the 49ers are drafting in round 3. and use that 4th round pick as collateral to go up even further in round 3 than you could in round 2, and definitely further than you could in round 1. So instead of going up 4 spots in round 1, you could go up 10 spots in round 2. You can go up 20 spots in round 3, maybe, And so that's what I'm looking at for the 49ers. And we got to do a mock draft that's like this. And actually, yeah, so subscribe to the new channel. I'm going to do a mock draft, I think, very soon on the new Overtime with Brian Peacock, OT with BP. You got to check it out. There's going to be a lot of good draft conversations there, and who knows what else. But I'm going to do a mock draft there. That's going to be my strategy. There's going to be one trade up. It's going to be a 4th round pick that I'm using to spend on one of those first 3 round picks, probably round 2 or round 3, to go up and get one of my guys that's fallen after going best player available at pick 31. What do you think about that draft strategy, Croc?
I like it. I like that. Again, as long as you're not forcing it, right? And we've seen the 49ers make some slight trade-ups. Heck, think about the Brandon Aiyuk situation. What they have to give up to move up to get Brandon Aiyuk? When the 49ers picking 31, and they moved up to what, pick 26, 27 to get him? And I think they gave up the 3rd that they gained in the trade back when they got Kinlaw. So when you move strategically like that and you're still able to get a player that you identify as someone who fits with what you do and can come in and play like Brandon Aiyuk did, I'm all for that. And it wasn't really forced.
This draft is a lot like that. And you just swap that wide receiver need for offensive line need, I think. And the 49ers could get up to, say pick 25, I think it was. They went from 31, and they're at 31 again this year, and went up to pick 25. And it didn't cost them a crazy amount. Maybe even dip into next year's draft if you don't want to give up your 3rd rounder this year. But for me, it's that 4th rounder. You got 3 4th rounders, use one of those. Even package a 7th with it. Whatever you have to do to, a late day 3 pick this year, next year, whatever sweetener you have to do to get up to get your guys, make the draft board work for you. I'm definitely a fan of that. I'm seeing some good ones in the chat.
Real quick, Jesus says Niners passed on Jefferson to get Aiyuk. Jefferson was already off the board. He got picked 23rd overall, I believe.
Yep. Yeah.
Now the Eagles passed on Jefferson to draft Jalen Reagor.
So Reagor, Jefferson, then there was like maybe one more pick, and then it was Aiyuk. Yeah. And I think that's why the Niners moved up, because those wide receivers were starting to go, and Aiyuk was their guy, so they went up and got him at pick number 25. Now, they did pass on Jefferson when they drafted Kinlaw earlier, because that was their 2nd first-round pick in 2020.
But I kind of like that. Like I like that idea of getting, again, usually defensive linemen. It is it's a little bit more difficult to get the guy. So if you feel like at pick 14 in a trade back, you're able to get the guy that you identify on the defensive line, even though it didn't work out, and come to find out he had one good knee, but you moved up for that position, and then you waited till later and got a receiver. I like that, because even think about the receivers that went, 6, 7 picks later. T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, and even Chase Claypool, who ended up having a really good rookie year, fell off after that.
Man, I like the 2nd round area. 2nd round for wide receivers. That's the sweet spot. Now, if the right guy's there in the 1st round, sure. Marvin Harrison Jr., absolutely, go draft that dude. But I like this class in the 2nd round. I've liked so many classes in the 2nd round. There was DK Metcalfs and Deebo Samuels and AJ Browns, along with the other guys you mentioned there in 2020. And you just go through all these drafts, and we've seen it in 2014. We've seen it in all these classes where there's a lot of wide receivers. You can get a really good player in the 2nd round. So I'm circling I'm circling day 2 for wide receiver if the 49ers go there, if the right player is there for them that fits what they're looking at. We've got a question here about Brandon Dorless.
One second, Peacock.
Yeah.
But the thing is, remember, you got to get the right guy, because if people kind of go back and remember their time, right, in the Deebo Samuel draft, there was another receiver that the 49ers would have drafted if he was there. Do you remember the name?
The report goes that one of the guys that went at the end of the 1st round is actually a guy the Niners liked more out of Arizona State, if I'm not mistaken, right?
N'Keal Harry.
Yeah. Not as explosive as Deebo Samuel. That would not have been a great pick, and really a great fit for the 49ers. That's why I was a little worried at Brandon Aiyuk at first. When they did the Aiyuk pick, I was like, I like Aiyuk. He was actually exactly 31, or he was 30 or 31 on my board that year. Niners were picking 31. They moved up. It's like, did you need to go up to get Brandon Aiyuk? Is this just this Arizona State thing? Are you only going to draft guys out of South Carolina and Arizona State? Like, that's kind of weird. You're limiting yourself. Iowa, you can only draft from 3 colleges. Kind of weird. Turned out great with Brandon Aiyuk, though, by the way. Oregon defensive lineman Brandon Dorless. He's on the list. We have not scouted him yet, but the 49ers have brought him in for a 30 visit, and the 49ers are sniffing around these guys. Darius Robinson, big end, could play some D tackle. Brandon Dorlus, big end, can play some D tackle. Ruka Rororo from Clemson, a big end tackle hybrid player. I like those guys round 1, round 2, round 3. So Robinson 1, Rororo in round 2-ish, and Dorlus maybe round 3, round 4. I can see the 49ers drafting one of those guys for sure. It kind of gives you some coverage and some versatility, both end and tackle in one player. But I haven't done the deep dive yet on Dorlus. We will get to him, I think, before the draft on this show. Question here. Dr. Steve Brule. Love the handle. Offensive line money market went up a lot this year. I like the cost control of drafted guys. Got to hit on the picks, though. And I agree. And even guard money went kind of crazy this year. So, like, offensive linemen are expensive, and the 49ers haven't had high picks to draft some of these guys. And I'd be shocked if the 49ers get out of round 2 and they haven't drafted at least one offensive lineman. And I would love for the 49ers to be able to get a legit tackle in round 1 and then come back and get like a guard center type in round 3, 4, too. Yeah, draft a couple of them. Draft 3 of them.
Center feels like a position out of all. And again, I don't know what Kyle Shanahan is saying in these draft rooms and whatnot, but the center position, it feels like he's leaned more towards the veterans. But maybe that's just with how the board has fallen and maybe gaining a guy and then, oh, man, it works out like Ben Garland. You know, did we know that it would work out to where he was like a Pro Bowl alternate, and we still look at someone that should be replaced, but the NFL said, hey, he doesn't stink. Now, again, I don't know how he's truly viewed. Sometimes you're just on a really good team. So guys kind of get his one foot in the door when it comes to the Pro Bowl votes. But Kyle has leaned more on the veterans at the center position. I wonder if he continues to kind of do that. And I said Ben Garland. I meant Jake Brendel.
Yeah, Jake Brendel. But they've had, it was a Daniel Brunskill. They've had, they can work with a smart, tough guy, especially on the interior.
Rich Bird.
Yeah, Rich Bird. At tackle, it's a little bit more difficult. And they've really leaned on veterans at center too. But if you can draft a guy who's a center of the future, but can play guard and work in as a rookie, then maybe next year takes over for Jake Brendel. I think that would be a nice pick, especially if you're able to get more of a tackle earlier on in the draft. All right, more draft conversation, Q&A. Hit us with your draft questions in the chat, and we will hit those next. Question about a couple of wide receivers I want to get to next as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Claim as of Q1 2024. Validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% match on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial, LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Wide receiver in round 1. Where did that question go? Wide receiver in round 1 to replace Aiyuk is the idea, Croc. What do you think about that? Wide receiver in round 1. Here it is from the 49ers 2024. If you're replacing Aiyuk, he's already traded, though, right? So if you draft if the 49ers go into the draft and they're on the clock at 31 and Aiyuk's already not been traded, then you're drafting a player to replace Debo in the future. You're not drafting a player to replace Brandon Aiyuk, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
And also, I'm just not a big fan of drafting a player to replace this player. Now, again, if it's the highest player on your board, then great. Or you identify a receiver that you feel like has a specific role. And then Kyle, he's been a little weird with these younger receivers. So with the sense of urgency that the 49ers have, you definitely that guy that you like, he has to be someone that you strongly feel will have a specific role. He may not have to do everything, right? Deebo Samuel, he now does a lot of different things, really a little bit more specific role over the last year or so. But Brandon Aiyuk, does a lot of different things. Maybe you draft someone and say, you know what, you're not going to be everything that Aiyuk was, but between this guy and this guy, we'll get a combination of what Aiyuk did in that production. And maybe that's a guy you don't have to get in the first round to replace Brandon Aiyuk. I feel like when you force the replacement, a lot of times it gets a little weird. And we saw that with DeForest Buckner and Javon Kinlaw's situation. There was a lot of pressure on Kinlaw to come in and be the guy, and didn't work out for whatever reason. But we've also seen it other times. We see it work with Diggs and Justin Jefferson, but then we also see it not work with A.J. Brown and the receiver out of Arkansas. Blanking on his name.
Treylon Burks.
All right, and Treylon Burks, right? Where it's like, what is Treylon Burks? Nope, got to spend $90 million or whatever on Calvin Ridley because Treylon Burks isn't what we expected him to be. So I am not a big fan of, trade this guy. Okay, let's just replace him in the draft. Let's find the best player, and if it falls to us, then great. And maybe that receiver that you really like is in the second round. Don't force it in the first.
I think we had that conversation too when there was all the Deebo rumors. It was like, okay, if you get pick 10 from the Jets, you go draft Garrett Wilson.
Now, if you like Garrett Wilson, like if you just felt like, well, we're not just taking him to replace him. Like it's like, no, Garrett Wilson is a guy, which turns out arguably the best receiver in that class.
Yeah.
Okay. That would have worked. Now, okay, here's a question for you. Knowing what the trade compensation was for Deebo, which understandably so the 49ers turned it down. Yeah. But let's say, hypothetically speaking, you accepted it, right? So it was Deebo and pick 61 for pick 10.
Yeah. That
was the offer from the Jets. And let's say you're all right. So we know we're not going to have that late second round pick, but okay, we like Wilson. Would you be happy with Wilson and no Drake Jackson? Because essentially that's what that pick turned into.
Yeah. I'd be happy with that. But you get the benefit of knowing Wilson's already great and knowing that Jackson has been, kind of a big question mark for the 49ers right now.
Well, and that's kind of when you think of a risky move, I think that's part of it, right? Just not knowing. At the time, pick 61 is not a player; it's just a number. And then you have to
by the value of your player. You just value your player more than that. You value your player at. I know I'm not going to give up a second rounder also to get this unknown coin flip of a first round pick.
You think straight up would have got it done?
I think it should have. I don't know if it would have. That's what I'm saying. That's what the 49ers, they, at the time, you're valuing the player and what you're getting in return, not knowing what the answer is going to be with the picks, right? But
Deebo coming off a 1,400-yard season through the air, another 300 or something on the ground.
And by the way, they could still trade Deebo and get a second-round pick next year, and that might be the move. That might be what ends up happening. Or maybe a first-round pick. I don't know what that is.
If Deebo has, let's say, the same year he had this season, do you think he goes for a second?
I think it's
1,000 total yards.
Yeah, I would think Deebo's younger, different style of player. It depends on the team. He would go for at least a future second, like what Diggs got.
I think with the way that this class is and how heavy it is on the offensive tackle spot, then 49ers, you gotta know which guy that they are identifying that fits what they like to do. But if hypothetically you traded Brandon Aiyuk away, I would like to get an offensive tackle because I feel like it'd be high enough to grab a guy that is like a day one starter. And then at pick 31, it's open. I mean, I would like Darius Robinson, but you potentially can get Kool-Aid. Maybe you get a receiver because he's the highest player on your board. Maybe you go tight end 2. I'm going to keep harping on that tight end 2 spot.
McConkey. Little McConkey at the end of round 1. Very likely the 49ers are going to be picking from someone who has more of a second round grade than a first round grade at pick 31. And so that might be a big group of guys. And so that's when you do start thinking about trading down if the offer's there. I'm going to go to Ian. Says, I think they will draft a corner, especially with Lenore and Ward being free agents after next season. You always have to think a year ahead, too. So they've got some upcoming free agents. Juwan Jennings is going to be an unrestricted free agent now. He's going to be in his last year as a restricted free agent this year. So not only do you have to do a deal with Brandon Aiyuk, you got to figure out Juwan Jennings as well. Do you let him walk? Do you re-sign Juwan Jennings to a number 3 wide receiver money, then trade Deebo Samuel next offseason.
I think they have Juwan Jennings replacement.
You think what?
I think they have Juwan Jennings replacement.
Ronnie Bell, ready to go?
Ronnie Bell.
Okay. And
remember, what was the main thing? What was the main thing we identified with Ronnie Bell that we said, oh, Kyle Shanahan's going to love this?
That he blocks.
He blocked, right? And when 49er fans, when they talk about Juwan Jennings, what's the one thing that they harp on about Juwan Jennings? Like, what's that thing that he brings that feels like, man, this is a big value of Juwan Jennings to this team?
I'm just thinking now, does Ronnie Bell just completely replace Ray McCloud this year for the 49ers?
I think the 49ers hope so. I mean, that was a guy, he was doing punt returns and kickoff returns in preseason.
They kind of stopped letting him do that, though. I feel like they didn't like what they saw there.
Well, I think once you got Ray McCloud back, that was a guy that was top 10 in both kick return and punt return. Matter of fact, I think kick return, he might have been top 3.
Maybe there just wasn't room for him because then he didn't. I guess he did show up again once Deebo was hurt a little bit, right? And then he disappeared again.
Well, Kyle is not. If it's up to Kyle, he's just going to use the same 3 guys.
Yeah.
And then a sprinkle of Ray McCloud. There's not a lot of balls to go around. Like the 49ers just don't throw the ball a whole lot. I think in the offense that is more influx with passing, Ronnie Bell might have had, kind of a bigger, more responsibility. But because 49ers, they're not going to spread it out, 4 or 5 wide and throw the ball all around. A guy like Ray McCloud can kind of just slip through the cracks. I don't think it was a Ronnie Bell situation. I don't think it was a Danny Gray situation with Ronnie Bell.
Yeah, Danny Gray is, I think, officially in the doghouse, whereas Ronnie Bell is just, down on the depth chart a little bit. Someone says Juwan tight end 1. I do think legitimately Juwan Jennings is tight end 2. Stop with the tight end 2 stuff, Niners. Juwan Jennings is your tight end 2. Let's go.
Yeah. Peacock.
He's a split outside. He's Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce doesn't block anybody. Juwan Jennings blocks as many people as Travis Kelce does. Split him out. Move tight end.
We have to address this with Juwan Jennings.
Okay.
Clutch third down catches is what comes to mind when I think of Juwan Jennings. He had like 25 catches on the year.
All first downs, Croc.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot like Kendrick Bourne, and I just thought Kendrick Bourne was better. Just contested catch, he was a dog. I thought he was better at creating separation. He was third and Juwan Jennings. Like that was Kendrick Bourne. It was this thing, it was touchdown or first down. Like that was Kendrick Bourne on third down. And he was like terrific in the red zone. Matter of fact, he had a couple years there where he like led the 49ers in receiving touchdowns, catches. So that's a position right there. Like, do I think that on third down, Ronnie Bell can make catches? Like, I believe so. I'm not saying he's just going to come in. He's the better player than Juwan Jennings, but I can't see a scenario where they just say, okay, yeah, all right, Juwan Jennings, like, we're not going to pay you anymore. Ronnie Bell, year 3 coming up, like, let's go, let's rock. Like, we've seen from you. Your role on this team has started to grow a little bit more. Like, we can have you as 3, but you're not the guy. So whether it's Aiyuk gone or Deebo gone or whatever, like, don't count on Ronnie Bell to be the guy. Count on him to be 25, 30 catches a year, like kind of what you're getting from Juwan Jennings, but with return ability.
Third and Ron.
Third and Ron.
We'll workshop that one. I don't know if that one has a ring to it. All right, we got to get out of here. Appreciate everybody jumping in the live chat with your questions, talking NFL draft. We will continue to talk NFL draft, do some live Q&As. We're doing deep dives on more prospects, and look out for Croc to join me on the OT with BP channel, where we're going to spend some time. It's going to be a longer episode than we can put here on Locked On 49ers, and we're going to hammer out our big board for the San Francisco 49ers. In the chat, Viet Taz says the OT show was really good. Love the longer format and the F-bombs. Yeah, well, there's no rules on OT. That's what it's all about. OT with BP. There's no rules over there. We can go long. We can drop some bombs if we need to. We can get into any topics we want.
When I do get on there, we have to have like a certain segment, and I won't be on all the time. Like, this is Peacock's channel. Let's make that very clear. But I wouldn't mind hopping on for like a little cocktail segment or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, Peacock has a cocktail of choice. You know, we sip that and talk a little bit of 49 football before I get out of there. I like that.
We'll recreate some of our hangs when we're hanging out in real time, like in the city or wherever we are. When we're together, the few times per year when we are together, we'll do one of those, and we'll get together some cocktails. You bring Donald on too. I know he likes his. I think he was hitting the Hennessy with the. I think probably 3-finger pours too. They're pretty big when we were in the city the last time. Sober driver Croc though, so you can be at home. You don't have to be the sober driver for that one. All right, appreciate everybody jumping in on the live chat, and thanks for being everydayers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Find us on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Croc and I back next week. More mocks, more prospects, and keep a lookout for some big board action as well. Talk to you then right here. Locked On 49ers.